I think we'll go ahead and get started here since we're at time. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, May 24th, 2018 Board of Adjustment meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Hanson?
Here.
Dolly?
Here.
Culhane?
Here.
Stein?
Here.
Ford? Here. Oletsky? Present. Olson, Dargis Johnson, and Kays are absent. We have a quorum.
So first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, and we do have an adjustment to the April 19th minutes. So I'd ask for a motion to include that adjustment. Motion by Stein.
I'll second.
Second by Diana. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And then for the rest of the members of the board, I did have a conversation with staff about doing our voting on the actual agenda items a little bit different going forward. I'd like to do each item as a roll call vote instead of a consensus vote like we have typically done in the past. So as we go through each agenda item, once we're done with discussion, we have the motion. I'll turn it over to staff, who will take a roll call vote of the board. Second item on the agenda is going to be the Stulkin and Lossing appeal, item 18038. Jill?
Yes. Application was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 624 square foot, 24 by 26 unattached garage on an 8,250 square foot parcel. Said structure proposed to be constructed 20 feet from the front or south property line, where a minimum 25 feet is required. The staff finds that this platted lot meets minimum R2A required lot width and exceeds minimum R2A required lot area requirements. Currently, the parcel consists of a non-compliant primary structure, a single-family dwelling, with 336 square foot attached garage, providing one enclosed parking space on this corner parcel, and alley side space is available for outdoor off-street parking. There is sufficient buildable area to construct a completely compliant garage without variances. Ordinance allows up to 1,072.5 square feet on parcels this size. If application is endorsed, this board may consider requiring fulfillment of any and all lacking boulevard infrastructure requirements in conjunction with any structural improvements authorized by building permit. Consideration of south sidewalk improvement is recommended, as it will complete pedestrian connectivity for a 3-block area.
Thank you, Jill. This time I'd like to open the public hearing if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. Are the applicants here? Can you go ahead and step forward, state your name for the record?
Dylan Lossing.
Thank you, Dylan. I did have a couple of questions here for you. So you're actually in the process of purchasing this property?
Correct.
And the request for variance is just for the south property, south setback from 25 to 20 feet?
Yes.
And that setback then is in line essentially with the house. The house, it looks like, is set back at 20 feet currently.
Yes. That's what we thought it would be.
So as Jill said, one of the requirements that we have for boulevard infrastructure improvements is sidewalk on both streets.
Right.
Currently, there's no sidewalk on the south side. So as part of this conditional approval, that's one thing that I would request that we have added is the sidewalk. Is that going to be a problem for you to install as well?
No, we already discussed that, me and my wife, so it'll be okay.
What about the boulevard trees? Do those meet the standard too, the requirement?
Actually, this property has an excess of boulevard trees. Yeah.
That's nice.
that can be something of a rarity where we see excess trees.
So if there is sufficient buildable area to construct a compliant garage, why this request?
Well, if I built the, like a compliant garage, I could only fit one vehicle in there. I'm asking for it wider so we can fit two.
How wide does it have to be to meet the buildable requirement? Do you know that one, Jill?
The property allows for a 19-foot width instead of a 24-foot width. People do tandem garages. It's an oversized one stall really at that point for tandem.
24 is typically what you're going to have for 2 cars, though, if you want to be able to put them in there and open the doors and everything else. I'm actually going to approach the board later today and ask for a rewrite of the ordinance to this, because on these 50-foot narrow lots that are meeting R2A district and they're corner lots, I mean, a 20-foot setback would be much more reasonable than a 25-foot on these small lots, so somebody could actually put something in there. We're trying to get them to take these trailers and boats and everything else off the street, and a reasonable application, I think, would be to allow a 20-foot setback versus a 25. But again, that's a discussion I want to have a little later with you.
That's funny that you say that, because I have some supporting documentation. Basically, I was thinking the exact same way.
Yeah.
To me, it's just unreasonable that a 25-foot setback on that south property line there basically takes half of your lot away immediately, not to mention your other setbacks. So you end up with 28% of your lot is all you got for buildable area there. And 20-foot, I think, seems like a reasonable compromise.
Chairman, I do want to point out one thing too. If we put that sidewalk requirement across the 6th Avenue portion of the property, there will not be adequate space to park a car in front of that garage without blocking the sidewalk. So they may need that extra space over on the new garage to adequately park.
That's one of the things that I'm looking at in this new proposed addition too, is that the access that they're proposing is off the alleyway versus off the street. And that's something that we would try to avoid where it's on the street side, where we're adding a curb cut, and then also for the encroachment on the sidewalk. So for future developments, definitely encouraging access from the alleyway wherever possible.
I agree with that approach.
Is this garage going to be accessed from the alley?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it will.
So that's good.
So then there wouldn't be a sidewalk issue if this is accessed from the alley?
Well, no, what it does is it gives them options. So if we put a sidewalk on the one side, then they park in front of their garage on the alley instead of in front of the street side garage. So it's actually a net win for the traveling public on 6th Avenue.
All right.
Yeah, the problem would come into play with the existing garage there, which is already set back at only 20 feet and accessed from the street. So currently today, if you're parked in that driveway, you're probably encroaching into the public right-of-way. It's just not as apparent when there's not a sidewalk there.
Yeah. That's true.
But this will have a net benefit on the lot and for the neighborhood, because we go from 1 parking place to 3 parking places on the property.
And this is just for parking your own personal vehicles. It's not for any commercial use.
No, just for us.
All right.
What are you going to do with the fence? You going to tear that down or leave it up?
We were planning on taking the fence and bringing it back, so we still have the fenced-in yard, but behind the garage.
Oh, okay.
So we just take the one side down and move it back instead of.
Is there any additional questions from the board? Any additional comments from the public? Thank you. With that, I'll close the public hearing. I'll go ahead and ask for a motion from the board.
Make a motion to approve. Sidewalk. Correct, with the improvement of the sidewalk. sidewalk improvement.
So we have a motion by Hanson, contingent upon a sidewalk installation along the south property line. Do I have a second? Second by Stein. Is there any additional discussion? I think one thing I'd like to point out, and like Ken said, it's a topic that I'd like to bring up under new business for the Plan Commission here later on today, where we can start a discussion on the setbacks for these R2A lots, so that in the future we may consider revision of this ordinance to support this on a more regular basis. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Jill and have her do a roll call vote.
Hanson,
Yay.
Dolly,
Yay.
Culhane,
Yay.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
and Kays.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda, if I can find my agenda. Well, it's item 3. Jill?
Randall Properties.
Yep, Randall Properties.
Thank you.
What's that? Yes, Todd Kays arrived during that conversation, for the record.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to get oriented here. Okay. Application was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 1,200 square foot, 30 by 40 unattached garage on an 8,250 square foot parcel. Said structure proposed to be constructed 14 feet from the front or east property line, where a minimum of 25 feet is required, and on a parcel that allows for a maximum 1,072.5 square foot unattached garage. Staff finds that this platted lot meets minimum R2A required lot width and exceeds minimum required R2A lot area requirements. Currently, the parcel consists of a non-compliant primary structure, single-family dwelling, with 463 square foot attached garage and 360 square foot legal non-conforming carport, providing 2 covered enclosed parking spaces on this corner parcel and ample open space available for outdoor off-street parking. There is sufficient buildable area to construct a completely compliant garage without variances. Ordinance allows on parcels this size up to 1,072.5 square feet. Staff does not support a second access onto 3rd Street West and recommends that any approval mandate northern alley access and or southern access via existing driveway. If application is endorsed, this board may consider requiring fulfillment of any or all lacking boulevard infrastructure requirements in conjunction with any structural improvements authorized by building permit.
Thank you, Jill. With that, I'll open the public hearing. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
My name is Todd Randall. And we're requesting this variance just mainly to comply with new ordinances with as far as parking trailers, boats, campers, fish shacks, things like that on city streets. And that is the reason for the size of the garage, to be able to have a 3-stall garage, which is very common. We come up to this size to suit our needs, also matching up with the existing structure on the property lines. And we acknowledge that the driveway there would not be a parking slab. If that does, that would block the sidewalk. That's why I decided to slide the garage in 10 feet to the property line. If a person did need to park a vehicle over there temporary or something, you wouldn't be blocking a driveway. We propose just leaving residents parking in the current carport driveway area. And the reason why we are opposing alley access is because the neighbors to the north, that's where they park their vehicles, right in that alley. I got some photos I guess I could pull up and show you guys. And then also too, every time a person be trying to back a boat or a fish shack or a trailer or anything in your garage, you'd have your headlights, you know, shining directly into their window, things like that. If it happened to be in the evening hours, and then just, you know, the awkwardness of backing in through the alley and then to the garage in that direction. And then also too, with the, to get the depth I need for the garage, it would be a very long and narrow garage, and that would take up most of the yard.
So looking at the setbacks, you mentioned keeping it in line with the existing building, but it looks like the existing garage is actually set off the property line by right at 24 feet.
That could be correct. And to add note too, that existing garage really isn't even functional. It's got an old, you know, call it the old swing-up doors. You could get a real small compact car in there, would be about it. Future plans for that is to actually make that garage more of like a, I guess you'd call it like a Four Seasons room or a storage area or something. And if you drive by and look, it's not even being occupied or used as a garage right now, even though it is a structure that says it's a garage. It's more so a storage area.
Is this your principal residence?
No, it is not.
So the house is used as a rental, and you want to add the garage for your own personal storage?
Both personal and renter garage, park space.
Joe, what is the staff's main objection to the additional driveway?
I could let Shane answer that.
Okay, so the issues related to the driveway are 3rd Street West is a collector street, and we try to minimize how many accesses we have on there. Now, granted, this portion of 3rd Street is a primary residential neighborhood, so the older neighborhood did have multiple accesses onto that street. However, it's our goal to not include arbitrarily extra driveways unnecessarily. In this case, we did ask that they review reorienting the garage such that the alley would be the primary access point rather than 3rd Street. Secondly, I'd like to point out, similarly to the discussion we just had on the previous one, the setback between the garage doors and the back of the sidewalk is only going to be 14 feet. Unless you have a very short car, you're going to be hanging over onto that sidewalk and public way with any parking vehicles in that driveway. So that's also going to be an issue potentially with the residents of the neighborhood. If they're walking on the sidewalk and complain, then the police department may be dispatched there to address the blockage of the sidewalk. So there are a couple reasons to not take this decision lightly. One is the access is available on the alley, which takes it off of 3rd Street, and then, of course, if you're going to put a sidewalk there, that you're going to block it with the traffic.
Thank you. A question for Mr. Randall then. If the commission here follows the staff recommendation and does not provide variance for the driveway, is that going to change the size and the makeup of your garage?
Yes, it would.
Would it be compliant then, or would with respect to the size and the setbacks?
Size, I don't know if it would be if I had to build it the other way and make it deeper and longer and come in from the alley. But again, like I said there, that we would oppose to doing that just because it would pretty much eat up the whole yard. And again, like the reason for the size of the garage is, you know, to make a functional, usable garage, just as the previous gentleman said, you know, whether you want to park 2 vehicles wide or back something in to keep it off the street to abide by the ordinances. Any boat or recreational vehicle, you need a minimum of, you know, I just measured my boat and my fish shack this morning. They're both 24 feet from hitch to bumper, and that's not leaving, you know, walk around room or nothing. I mean, that's just that. So you need a minimum of, you know, 28 foot or so just to even have any room to walk around once you backed him in a garage or something like that.
But just point of clarification, the garage that you're requesting is about twice the size of the last applicant's.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a number of things that you're asking for on this variance request. The setback, the maximum structure size, the additional driveway, curb cut off of the street. So it's a little bit of an apples and oranges situation.
Yep.
While at the face they are both garage requests, there's significant differences between the two.
Mm-hmm. So my question to the board would be, so if, let's say we consider coming in from the alley access, so do we need to take some kind of a, I guess, whatever action, legal or whatever, because the current residents to the north, there's always cars parked in that alley there that would prohibit, some access that they park right on the edge of their property there. And it's not my objective to change what they've been doing or, try to cause any, problems that way.
I noticed that today too when I drove by. There was a car parked like 2 inches from the house, right? Is that
Yeah,
the one
there's
that you're
not much
talking
parking
about?
room on that property.
But let's say that if you sat your new garage farther back, because it kind of looks like two different properties, really. You have the rental house and stuff,
Mhm.
and where they park in their carport all the time.
Yep.
And then you have quite a bit of space in between there, like where they have their trampoline or something.
Yep.
So how far would you want to pull this new garage back and have an alley access with the driveway that you can come in and do one of those things?
See, for the legal width, then I'd have to build it so deep to fit 3 items, leave a stall for the tenants, and then have 2 stalls for myself. I would need to build it so long and narrow to fit what I would want to fit in there.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be feasible.
But if you kept it 30 wide, you could still get 2 nice garage doors and just kind of go tandem or something, couldn't you?
That's it, but I'd have to go almost 60 feet deep with it.
Well, the maximum size that the lot allows without being oversized would be like a 24 by 44. That's 1,072 square feet.
Yeah. Will you get more rent from the tenant? Is that why you want to give them the
Yes.
extra stall?
Yep, and there's really, like I said, there's really not a functional place to park a car in the garage right now. If you would happen to drive by and look at that garage door that's there.
Todd, where do you currently park your fish shack and your boat?
At my place, and most of the time not accordance to the ordinance. As a matter of fact, the city hall meeting, my house was one of them that they used an example of my boat being parked in front of my
Okay.
house up by Cornerstone Church. So
And there's no place on your current residence to build a garage that you could store your property on there?
Nope. We have a few rental properties, and as Ms. Oletsky said, it's a big empty lot, really, and I guess it just seems it's a piece of property that we own, and we would like to utilize it for that purpose, other than just mowing it, I guess.
It is a big empty lot, but it is in a residential neighborhood, and I guess I'm uncomfortable with going with a size any larger than is within the ordinance as it is, because it is a residential neighborhood. That gives me, and I do happen to drive on that road a lot. I don't know why, but I do, and I can see too the question about having the access off 3rd Street, as I feel uncomfortable with that also. While it could likely and is the best for you individually, I don't believe it's the best for the neighborhood overall.
Ken, what did you say, I'm sorry, for the maximum size garage that would be allowed?
Maximum size garage in this lot is 1,072 square feet. So if he was,
About a 24 by 40.
if it was 24, he could go 24 by 44. If it was 24 wide, or
But he could stick with the 30 wide and have it not as deep, correct?
But then you're looking at a 14-foot setback.
Yeah.
So while we granted a 20-foot setback, and that seems like a reasonable compromise, I think a 14-foot setback is far too small.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is for alley access, how
But the
deep
width,
would they need to
the
go?
maximum width that they could go and stick
Oh.
with a 20-foot is 26 foot,
Oh, got it.
or 24 foot.
24
and
foot.
standardly, he would be required to be 20 foot off the alley too. That would be that required setback if you're coming in perpendicular to the alley.
What did you just say, Blake? I didn't catch that.
So if they had a 20-foot front yard setback,
Okay, so
the
now-
maximum width that they could build that proposed garage is 24 foot, just like the previous property.
Right, so that's how you came up with 24 foot, because it's big enough for 2 vehicles, plus it would accommodate,
No.
it would still require a
That's not gonna
setback
happen
variance, correct?
For the alley access.
But only to 20.
Today,
20 feet
unless we were to
and then this
to change that.
Right, but even 24 foot wide would require a setback of 5 feet.
And then 40 feet.
No matter which way you look at it, it doesn't leave me much room to build anything either way to be within, compliance. I mean, all I could build is a real skinny, somewhat long garage, and take up most of the yard to have the setback off the alley and things like that.
But there again, this is a residential property, and so building a structure that large for use in storage of your stuff is more akin to a commercial operation where you're building a storage unit or something along those lines. So keeping this in the scope of a residential
But that's not to
environment.
say- Not to interrupt you, sir. That's not to say that this can never be sold as a owner-occupied residence too, and that's kind of what the mindset I have is the resale of the property is somebody wanting to buy a house that has a functioning garage.
Mm-hmm.
That's another.
So the existing home is built 9.5 feet from the property, from the east property line, is that correct?
That from the, yes, from the sidewalk there. I believe that's,
So then if we had, like 9.5 feet, so it lines up with this, and then
Do you have any additional questions, Todd?
I'm just trying to do the math in my head.
yeah.
I saw you thinking over there, so.
Sometimes it's hard.
So then are you thinking of the same way I'm thinking that if we can find let's say 10 feet, and here we have 6 feet, and 6 feet, and it's a 50-foot lot. For width. So if you went, and then, still went 40 feet deep.
Well, from a resale standpoint, whether it's a 3-stall garage or a 2-stall garage is still a detached garage, which would have resale value to the home, as either a rental or owner occupied. So while I empathize with what you're saying, I don't think that's a valid argument because it's still a detached garage. I would like to see if we can't find a way to get a 2-stall garage situated on there, because I think it does add value to the property and the tax base. And if there's a way that we could do it where you had an alley access, I'm not in favor of proposing 3rd Street access.
Yeah, I would certainly entertain, a different approach similar to the last applicant where we had a 24-foot wide garage, alley access.
It might very well be, Todd, that, if you got a 2-stall garage here, and if the problem right now is the parking of your personal property at your home, using that as the storage for that, and then the individual still has the ability the renter can still park under the carport, what have you. I think it fixes your issue with the ordinance that's being applied to you on your home property, or the other option is you get a 2-stall garage, you put your fish house there in the summer and your boat there in the winter, and then you find someplace else for the other option. But I would be in favor of a 2-stall garage accessing the alley, whatever that.
That'd be the 24 by 44, right?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Would we need to have them come back before us with a different site plan? I think I would prefer
I
to see a
think you
new
can just
site
put the
plan.
parameters on this,
Parameters and let staff work that out.
and then he's got the option either to accept it or not, but when he leaves here, then he won't have to come back.
Is there any other comments in the public while the hearing's open? Thank you, Mr. Randall. With that, I'll close the public hearing and I'll ask for a motion then.
Motion would be to approve a maximum size or two-stall garage as allowed by ordinance with the specifics to be worked out between the staff and the applicant when no access to 3rd Street West.
So that would include like the 20-foot setback from the alley and stuff for the drive and all that stuff?
Everything, as long as they can fit it and it meets the staff, can work it out with them. I'm fine with it.
But it would have to include the allowance of the 5-foot set, or the 20-foot setback.
Whatever the variance requirement would be to allow the 24 by 40, whatever that number would be to make it situate.
It'd be a 20-foot setback from the south property line.
From the alley?
From the, however it would be to make the.
It'd be 20 foot to the east and to the north,
Right.
from the alley
Yeah.
and from the 3rd Street.
What he said.
So
Thanks, Ken.
will someone just say that in plain, specific English? So
I make a motion
actually know what
to
you're saying?
make a motion to allow the applicant to construct a garage which meets the maximum square footage of 24 by 44 to be located the northern part of the property, no access to 3rd Street, a 20-foot setback from the alley, and a 20-foot setback from 3rd Street.
Perfect.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Mr. Kays,
I'll second that.
second by Oletsky. Any additional discussion? With that, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The fourth item on the agenda is actually an open public comments period. If anybody's here to speak to the board on an unrelated event to one of these agenda items. Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on to old business. Any old business, Joe? No old business? Need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Stein
Second.
on the plan commission. Second by Culhane. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Bonnie.
Sure.
Maybe, Todd, should we move you down here?
You can get closer.
Okay, 1 second. Pete, where did JS go? Where did JS go on this? But Jill should have it too. We can look at it another time. We'll just, I think we'll be all right without it. Shane, do you have GIS? Oh, okay. Because otherwise we could just transfer between screens. That, yeah, might be helpful. Okay. Ready when you are.
All right. Thanks, Brandy. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, May 24th, 2018 City Plan Commission meeting. Can I get a roll call? Or
Hanson?
Here.
Dolly?
Here.
Culhane?
Here.
Stein?
Here.
Case?
Here.
And Olson and Dargis Johnson are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Brandy. First item on the agenda is the invitation for public comment participant submittal. If you've got some public comments to make to the board, go ahead and approach the podium and sign up, and we'll have a period for that later on. Moving on to item 2 is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I don't see this on the agenda, but we had an action item that's been on the agenda for the last several agendas regarding the temporary sign ordinance. And I just think we probably need to add that to the agenda.
So then if we bring that, yeah.
I'm going to
we'll-
make a motion to continue, but I just want it on the agenda.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. And I was going to bring it up as old business. But since we did say that we were going to address it at this meeting, yeah, let's add, I'll find out. What's that?
Under number 9, I'll just make a motion to amend number 9 to talk temporary signs.
Yeah. Okay.
And then based on our conversation in the BOA meeting, I think we do need to have a discussion or a beginning discussion on the R2A setback. So maybe we can discuss that under new business as well.
That sounds good.
Motion to approve agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kays, second by Mr. Culhane. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the May 10th, 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Culhane,
Second.
second by Mr. Hanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Fourth item on the agenda is the plat of Willow Creek Village, 4th edition.
Thanks, Blake. Okay, so I pulled the plat up here on the screen. The petitioner is Donald Endress, who is the president of Willow Creek Village, 4th edition. And yeah, if you guys are confused about your packets, it's the second. Yeah, it's in there as if it's the second agenda item. Okay, so the petitioner submitted a plat of Willow Creek 4th edition that will include 8 R1 single-family residential lots and 2 R3 multifamily residential lots. Currently, the lots are zoned as R3 multi-residential, but the petitioner is also in the process of rezoning, which you guys have seen previously. Lots 1 through 8 of Block 1 will be rezoned to R1 contingent that the rezone ordinance amendment is approved by City Council on the May 21st, 2018 meeting. The rezone will become effective on June 15th, 2018. Some facts about this plat. The R1 single-family residential district and R3 multifamily residential district requirements are met. The park dedication for Willow Creek Village that was approved on June 25th, 2013. That sentence doesn't end. This plat is memorializing that park board decision and Plan Commission's ratification by approving the preliminary plan that included the park location. An access easement has been provided through Outlot A. A development agreement for the plat of Willow Creek Village 4th edition provides improvement details that are included in this development. And actually that right-of-way was platted with Willow Creek Village 2nd edition. First. No, I can't keep that one straight. Watertown Municipal Utilities will approve they have approved that the easements are sufficient. City staff supports Plan Commission recommending the plat of Willow Creek Village 4th addition to City Council.
Is the development agreement in order with the staff?
Yeah, and Matt, you had a chance to review it, and so we reiterated the right-of-way improvement requirements for 22nd Street East and 2nd Avenue South, because currently the improvements go up to where this plat will take off,
Right.
and that was included with the last development agreement. And they have submitted construction plans to get that road in this summer. And then in the future, you'll be seeing a preliminary plan for this area here that they've platted as an outlot now, which will make for a lot cleaner legal description. But that they platted that at this time because it makes it the park land contiguous to other platted land.
So I had a question on that egress easement that you've got there to access the park outlot. It looks like it starts at 66 feet wide and then it scales down to 48 foot. What's the reasoning there?
They did that as they're anticipating that they'll have a road there that when they plat that, it'll become right of way, which will be required to be 66 feet. And then the narrower portion is that will be a private drive.
Okay.
So it's like that in anticipation of the next plat and preliminary plan.
Do we know what the intention of use is going to be with Park Outlot A?
I believe that the developer would like to develop a sidewalk and bike trail area, and have that incorporated because they do feel that it'd be a scenic, just scenic, that it'd be a nice park, something to do with the park.
Yeah, I think the primary focus of their park is, at the discretion of the city, because the city will ultimately have the opportunity to enhance it. But right now, I think the premise is that keep it as natural as possible. There's a lot of wildlife and desirable things that are going on out there now that we hope to not disturb. And I guess ultimately that will be handed off to the park board on how they envision it. But a recreational trail through here is what's proposed at this time, probably a small parking lot through that access easement so that people can access the trail. That's what's proposed at this point in time.
So that might be similar to what we've got on the north side of Willow Creek Drive there along the river.
I believe this all dovetails with the master trail plan that we had looked at years ago.
I did have a couple additional questions on the development agreement. So under the sidewalks section, it has a bullet A says developer shall install or cause to be installed sidewalks, but item B says developer may pass the responsibility of sidewalk installation on.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused as to who's actually installing the sidewalk and when it would get installed.
That's standard language for our agreements because most of the time the developer does pass that on to the individual property owners, and then they put those in at time of building permit. But then what's nice about having that provision in there is that you can come back and it can be on the developer as well if the lot doesn't sell and you want to order it in.
So under general provisions, we say all required improvements shall be installed within 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't sell it and pass it on to the owner within 2 years, it would fall back to their responsibility.
Yep. And we're going to start getting strict about our development agreements and doing inspections and making sure that requirements are done within 2 years.
Good. That was all my questions. Did you guys have any?
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Case. Second by Mr. Stein. Can I get a vote?
Yes, Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes.
Colhane?
Yes.
Stein?
Yep.
Case?
Yes.
All right. Motion
Resolution passes. So item 5 is a plat of East Side Edition.
Now this is the, if you guys flip forward or backward in your packet, sorry. Yeah, this is all backwards. Okay. All right, look at here. I'm just gonna read off the screen. Okay, so the petitioner is Rex Gerber, who is the representative for Eastside Investments LLC and the owners of the property. The petitioner submitted a plat to vacate the former plats of R. Redland Edition and R. Redland Second Edition and reestablish the utility easements within the property. This plat does not require an infrastructure improvement, or does not require infrastructure improvements, but because the utility easement is being located, it is brought to Plan Commission and City Council for approval instead of being an administrative process. Watertown Municipal Utilities has been working with Mr. Gerber and are in agreeance with the relocation of the easement, as they will be burying the overhead power lines within the new easement shown on this plat. This property is zoned I-1, which is light industrial. The minimum required lot area is 30,000 square feet. This specific lot is 233,762 square feet, so it exceeds that. The minimum required lot width is 100 feet, and this frontage has 345.9 feet. This plat vacates and combines two former plats of record and reestablishes utility easements. The plat has been approved by Watertown Municipal Utilities for confirmation of sufficient easements. City staff supports Plan Commission recommending the plat of East Side Edition to City Council. And so then here is the new plat, and then I also, in your packets, I did attach the previous recorded plat so you can see kind of what he's combining. So this is the northern half of the lot, and then this is the southern half, where that used to be railroad right of way. And so they're just gluing them together and then relocating those easements, because otherwise it made for unusable space.
So the previous easement weren't along the perimeter of the property line, and now we're moving them to basically the southern, is that the southern portion of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it used to, this property here used to be its own lot,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how they conveyed it when it was the former railroad property. And so then there was the rear yard easements, and so now that the same owner owns both of these, they're just relocating them, so it doesn't make unusable space.
Do we have existing utilities going through those easements?
Mark Meyer, Utilities. Yes, there is a pole line, but that's it. But we had one call called in to verify there was no other utilities, and there wasn't. And we've discussed with the owner about taking the overhead down and placing it underground so he can use the land.
Okay. And then the underground utility would be within the new easement as laid out?
Correct. It'll go along the south and then the west side of property.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Case, second by Mr. Culhane. Any additional discussion? Can I get a vote?
Yep. Hanson?
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes.
Colhane?
Aye.
Stein?
Yes.
Case?
Yep.
Motion passes. Item 6 on the agenda is a rezone of a portion of Lot 3 and 4 of Northridge Edition.
I have no idea why this This is so messed up. I did this one, and I didn't think I messed it up as bad. That's what I get, though, because usually Lori does a much better job keeping me organized. I can't even get to it. I gotta find it. Okay. Okay. Here we are. So the petitioner is Travis Mogg, who's the owner of the property. Petitioner submitted application and petition on May 3rd, 2018, requesting approval for rezoning the current described property from C2 Community Commercial District to C3 Highway Commercial District. The attached vicinity map shows how the property has partial zoning of 2 commercial districts. For development purposes, this rezone is to designate the entirety of the property with 1 zoning district, which is proper procedure that district requirements would adhere to. The zoning designations are C2 Community Commercial and C3 Highway Commercial. Adjacent properties, zoning districts are C2 Community Commercial to the north and east, C3 Highway Commercial District to the west, R3 Multifamily Residential District to the south and east. The C3 minimum lot requirements are 20,000 square feet. This lot has 37,489 square feet. The minimum lot width is 100 feet, and this property has 150 feet. Rezone will extend and apply to the center line of the adjacent public right-of-ways, and this property is not within the floodplain. City staff supports Plan Commission recommending the rezone of the above described property to City Council.
Is there a proposed change of use of property with this rezoning? Are they looking at doing something different than the car wash?
I believe the owner of the property is looking to sell, and then his buyer would like to kind of redevelop what's going on there, but I don't think that the use of a car wash is changing. And so that's when this came into question, is when they came to ask about the lot.
But there are different uses in the C3 zone than there are in the C2 zone.
Right. But
and that the R3 that abuts the C2 currently is different than this. I mean, it could potentially impact the R3 development to the north. Based upon what C3 use was placed in there.
Right. Yep. I mean, it is adjacent to C3 as well.
But the R3 is kitty corner to it. What does the land use plan say about it?
Well, I would say with the proximity to the highway that it would be appropriate.
Okay.
And the only reason that it was zoned this way is because of how it runs up to the north. Like this property got split, I don't know, in a blanket zone, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. So
For the fact that a highway commercial use that would be permitted today in the C3 district is going on there today, and it hasn't been disruptive. A car wash, I believe, is a conditional use in the C2 zone, but it is a permitted use in the C3. And so
that lot, as it stands today, is actually dual zoned in a sense. Part of it's zoned C3 and part of it's C2.
yeah. So it's just choosing one and cleaning it up that the property has one zoning designation, so then we can regulate from something.
Did staff receive any comments from adjoining property owners?
Yes, I received calls from Stony Brook Suites and the Cowboy gas station there, and they were just wondering if anything was changing. And I believe that it will change. They'll be rebuilding a car wash, but the car wash use is going to stay the same.
Does the property that we're talking about actually abut the R3, or is there? It looks to me like there's a little bit of a parking lot from the Northridge Clinic or something there that buffers it.
Yeah, there is still a little buffer.
So if they do change something there, though, and rebuild, screening is one of the things that we can consider during the building permit process.
Not if it's a permitted use.
Mm-mm. As long as they met their landscape requirements.
Gotcha.
If they came for a variance, then that's when you could. And the rear yard setback in C3, I believe, is 20.
Actually, commercial to residential, if it was rezoned all the way up to the R3, then we could require screening, but with the buffer from the parking lot from the clinic there, it kind of eliminates that.
The rear yard setback for C3 districts is 30 feet.
But
It
we can still strongly recommend it at the time of building.
Well, I just remember that up in this part of the world a few years ago, somebody wanted to put a bar and tavern up in this part of the world on the C3 lot, and the neighborhood was against it. In the C2, a bar tavern is a conditional use, but in the C3, a bar tavern would be a permitted use. And that's not that I'm against bars and taverns. It's just that I know that there was some issues with that several years ago.
So we just have to think about if the area is appropriate, which it's on a collector route and it's a block off of the highway. And as far as development, I feel like that actually might be nice to have more commercial activity happening.
But if it was C2, that wouldn't preclude them from doing the building or the operation that they want to do there. They would just have to come before the board for a conditional use. Is that correct?
Well, the other primary issue that you got here is, of course, this is split as already C3, C2, but then the side yard setback in the C3 is 20 foot, the side yard setback in the C2 is 30 feet. So you can, without variance, utilize another 10 feet of the side yard.
And that, I believe, was their main reason for wanting to go with C3.
More buildable area or less buildable area? I couldn't remember.
Less side yard setback.
More buildable area.
So, but I mean, when you're making your decision, think about in the future if this wasn't a car wash and if you would be okay with the permitted uses in the C3 district, if it were to get redeveloped as something different, which I do not believe is the intention of their rezone, but it is good to think ahead. So permitted uses are service stations, retail establishments, service establishments, motels and hotels, motor vehicle sales, office, financial institutions, restaurants, clinics, veterinary clinics, automobile parking lot, farm machinery, and semi-truck sales. So actually, a bar and tavern is a conditional use in the C3.
So because part of the lot is zoned as C2, part of it's C3, C2 regulations apply because it's mostly C2?
I don't know. I think that's why we want to definitely clean it up and rezone it to one designation.
This is a public hearing? Did we open public hearing?
No, but I will open public hearing.
I think I'm okay with the motion, to make a motion to recommend approval to the city council, but I do think we need to talk a little bit more and see if we have any more of these issues and, rezoning things, upzoning, downzoning, those types of things. I think they can get what they want as a C2. I think it's a nodal redevelopment. Highway commercial development is, to me, is on a highway. It's not a block off. I would look at transitionary zoning in the future, but I will move to make a recommendation to approve.
To approve it with C3. A motion by Mr. Case. Second by Mr. Stein. Any additional discussion?
Yeah, with this rezone to C3, we still do maintain transitional zoning. And it stretches it a little farther into where the R3 exists, but there is still that buffer. But good things to think about for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for a vote.
Hanson?
Aye.
Dolly?
Aye.
Culhane?
Aye.
Stein?
Yep.
Case?
So item 7 is for the open public comment. I don't believe anybody approached the podium to sign up. And I don't see anybody in the audience to speak, so we'll move on to new business.
Okay, so I actually do have something to present to you for the R1A single-family residential district that we've been talking about. And I'll pull it up here. So this is for discussion, but I wanted to have something that that would look as if it would be coming to you as an ordinance amendment. So we'll add it in underneath R1 single family residential district, and it'll be 2115, and it'll be R1A, which will have the same, it'll still be called single family residential district as we do with the R2s, with R2 and R2A. So then where we landed with the height and placement regulations, so if it's just one lot, it is required to be 5,000 square feet, and then I'll get to these sub-notes later. And then the minimum lot required width is 50 feet. The front yard setback would be 25, and I know at some time we had talked about 20 foot, but we felt it was appropriate because then if it's going into an existing R1 district, we don't want to have a less of a requirement where then it would be obstructing views potentially. And then also because of allowing for cars to park in the private driveway and having space so they weren't blocking sidewalks. The minimum required side yard would be 6 feet, and the rear yard would be 25 feet, and the overall maximum height would be 35 feet. And then we also talked about incorporating that two single family attached dwelling units, and they would have 0 lot line development. So again, they would be required that each lot had 5,000 square feet, which makes you need 10,000 square feet if you're going to have a 0 lot line development, shared wall, duplex. Again, 50 feet for each, and then the side yards are 0 to 6 foot on the non-party wall side. And then for corner lots, we increased the lot area to 6,000 square feet because you would have 2 fronts and you would be required to have 25 feet setback. Okay, so then now the footnotes there for H, underneath minimum lot area, the maximum allowable amount, okay, that needs to be rephrased, but the maximum allowable amount of lot coverage shall be 55%. And I know at one time we had talked about distinguishing between structure coverage and impervious surface coverage, but when we really thought about it, I don't think that it's necessary to be that strict on it, as long as we are having a maximum, which 55% is what I feel is appropriate, and we'll talk about that too and see. I'll show you guys an example. And then the maximum allowable driveway curb cut is 20 feet. And at one point we had talked about 12 feet, and that's because that would be for one single access. So the lot will be 50 feet, and if the driveway is 24 feet, which is standard for a 2-stall garage, there would not be sufficient, with your side yard setbacks, there wouldn't be sufficient space for a vehicle to park on the street. So that's why we landed at 20. Yeah, we can talk about that. Let's see. All of this language here is consistent with what R1 single family residential is currently. And then I added as a permitted use the 2-family attached dwelling units using 0 lot line development. But then then this is where it references the summary of district regulations, and then that you would refer back to that chart, and then also to the off-street parking ordinance. So you're meeting that requirement. And then I will open a different thing here. So this is which one is it? Okay, so I think that hatching would have been easier to explain to you guys, but I'll just maybe highlight. So this shows a 50-foot lot, which would meet the minimum lot width requirement, and then also a 100, and so it'd be 100 feet in length to make it 5,000 square feet and make it conforming for this district. And so I showed probably what most people would want for, we've talked about how people have toys they need to store, they have 2 vehicles, they want to be able to maneuver them. So what this footprint is showing is there is a garage here, and then this would be a bonus slab where you could store a camper or boat. And then also with the minimum setback being 6 feet, that would not allow for somebody to drive to their backyard, which becomes an issue. But I think it's still appropriate to set it at 6, but then, people should think about that when they're building, that they should leave 9 feet at least on one side, and then at least they can pave all the way up to their lot line, since they can't, then they can have another parking area. And then they would, because they have to watch out for their maximum lot coverage of 55%, you would need to, cut back on the amount of concrete. Any impervious surface that you're having on your lot needs to be under 55%. So this lot here, now this house, this is the footprint within the buildable area, and that would be 1,900 square feet. Still, that would be the largest structure that you could build on one of these lots, which is still generous, and especially because this stemmed from trying to create affordable housing, that you're not going to be able to exceed that, which should keep them more affordable. And then, the garage is still a 2-stall garage, 23 by 24. So, any questions?
So
discussion?
we have a minimum lot size. Do we have a maximum lot size?
No.
Should we?
Well, then in theory they would be R1.
That's my question. So at a certain point we reach the minimum lot size for R1. Should we make the maximum size?
So you're saying putting a cap at 9,000 in the R1A, because you might as well just be R1 then, and then you don't
Correct.
get the benefit of the...
Otherwise, you're going to create some 9,000, 10,000 square foot lots with smaller side yard setbacks and other requirements.
True. So you think adding
The cap would be, it's just that the maximum lot area for an R1A would be 8,999 feet.
Because at that point, it effectively becomes the minimum requirements for R1.
So do you guys think adding it as a footnote here? Like,
Lot area, just under lot area, you can put a footnote.
so I have it.
Well, we already pair all the lots right now within town based on 10% of lot width, never less than 6 feet. So whenever the lot hits 75 feet, it automatically goes back up to 9.
Okay.
I mean, so that's already within ordinance right now.
Okay, yes.
That's for R2A though, right?
It's for every lot. Doesn't matter where it's at.
So I'll add D as the footnote. So D says, when any parcel is 75 feet or more in width, the required side yard setback shall be a minimum of 9 feet. Or as more is specified in the table above, lots of record recorded prior to 2005 that present 10%. Wow, it's been a long day. That are less than 75 feet in width shall observe a minimum required side yard equal to 10% of the lot width, but not less than 6.
I don't think that's saying what you're saying.
No.
So if we just added it to specify what we want for this district?
There's other differences besides just the side yard setback between this proposed district and R1, right?
Yeah, because we have the maximum lot coverage.
So what I want to prevent is people zoning at R1A and then making large lots just to take advantage of the other benefits.
55% coverage of impervious surfaces on those larger lots.
Right.
Yeah, because that defeats the purpose, right?
What?
I don't think the R1 limits coverage, does it? Only R3. So why would they zone it R1A and be limited to 55% if they had a big enough lot to zone R1? There isn't for R1.
Should be.
I don't disagree. But that's kind of a can of worms. And some of these things, I really would like your feedback on these things. And Brandy and I talked about it briefly, but I want to make sure that there's enough room on the street for parking.
Yep.
And so we talked about the maximum driveway opening, making that more than 12, but less than 24. And thinking about why. You want to make sure that there's still a parking spot on the road. And if you look at our parking lot requirements, 9 feet is one lot width or one car width for a parking stall. So if you're parking on your driveway 18 feet, you could get 2 cars. Why would you need anything more than that? You're not going to get 3. I mean, you could widen up if you had enough in your bank for more impervious surface if you had a smaller structure. Maybe no garage, but you wanted to pave more for a pad or a carport. But what do you think about that driveway width? Is that going to be
I think that's
horrible?
good. I think that's good.
Fine. Are we going to be allowing the R1A to be just spotted?
That's another thing.
Checkerboard anywhere? Do I need a half a block at a time?
That's a good question, and so if you have half of a block of R1A and the rest of it's R1, is that a problem? Or
I think a half a block's a minimum. Otherwise, then you are truly spot zoning lot by lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also that becomes problematic from a neighborhood perspective too, of expectations.
Right, I agree. And I've seen the minimums in terms of square footage, but we don't know what it's really more of a function of blocks. I'd rather see it in a block reference as half of a block, or the entire, like when you say half of a block,
well,
do you mean the entire frontage from one street to the next?
I'm thinking stereotypically from an alley perspective, even though we don't have alleys.
Even if you didn't have alleys, but
it would be if there was an alley, it would have to be the south half of the
Right.
platted block. If there is no alley, then it would just cut it the block in half.
Right,
east to
how do you
west.
describe that without creating a checkerboard?
Show two graphic images of what we mean.
Right.
But don't you think that might create issues on people using this district? Because I can see it as like a redevelopment of R2A properties, perhaps, or just single lot, and at least it is still residential.
But the R2A has more functionality than the R1A as far as being able to make affordable housing, because I have no restriction on lot
You
coverage.
can 100%.
So I
We-
don't think the only thing that this would apply would be in R1 areas of town that maybe have smaller lots, north of 10th Avenue and some of those areas where you have existing R1A. If you want to make it an R1A, then do it on a half block basis. If you do it, two neighbors might not appreciate the middle neighbor coming in and on a small lot and doing something that doesn't coincide with what they already have. So I would recommend a half block.
I would just say that we do have a de facto limitation of the buildable area on R2A. So that's one of the things that we'll talk about, I think, after this discussion is because of our setbacks, we do impose limitations there.
Right.
And I've been thinking about that, again, back to the parking on the street. If there's no requirement in Brandy's draft to require a minimum uncut curb length, but I'm thinking that would be important, more so than with the driveway width. You don't want to put the driveway right in the middle of the lot, and then you've got two pieces, neither of which is wide enough for a car to park. So if you had a requirement to have a minimum of 20 feet, is that unreasonable?
No.
I'd like to add that just so that people can park on the street. And this cul-de-sacs bother me for on-street parking because in most of our cul-de-sacs that we have, it's so narrow, the entire circle is a driveway. And so no one can park in the cul-de-sac. But people park in the cul-de-sac all the time, and then it's hard to get around and difficult to maneuver. And I don't know if we even want to, if there's a way to prevent that. If someone wanted to create a cul-de-sac with R1A zoning, that could be troublesome if we have a minimum uncut curb length. You couldn't do a cul-de-sac, so is that okay?
Yeah.
So how I added it in here would be the maximum allowable driveway curb cut is 18 feet, minimum 20-foot contiguous curb frontage.
Those would be two separate things, though. I mean, you can put them on the same one, I suppose. Right. I don't want to create a bunch of problems, but also don't want to make a zone that gets abused or.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I was going with the maximum lot size, because I think the intention of this is great. We want to make affordable lots, and I just don't want it to be abused in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Maybe because of the other stipulations with percent coverage, we don't need to look at that.
It's more restrictive in that sense.
So going forward, you are going to have the draft prepared, and then we will see that at least a couple weeks before the public hearing.
This was the draft, and then I was going to have the public hearing on June 7th.
Okay. Future, though, I'd like to see it a week before. I'd like to see the draft before, so we're not reacting.
This
And
is it.
I know, but I'd like to see
Yeah.
the draft prior to a public meeting.
Oh, you mean?
So in the agenda packet.
In the agenda packet.
Can I have can you send the document to us afterwards or something?
Can we what?
Send the document.
Or we can we postpone the public hearing?
I have no problem with having a public hearing if this is what we're talking about, but in the future, when staff is preparing policy changes, I'd like to see the policy changes so I can have questions prepared prior to
Right.
reacting.
I agree.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's kind of hard to absorb it all just thrown at us like this.
Right,
And
well,
I-
and even for us.
I can email it to you, but that's what the purpose of having it on this agenda was, is to introduce it to you and explain it, and then we can get you the copies of it.
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is that we'd have better conversation and discourse if we knew exactly what the hell we were talking about prior to the meeting.
Before the work session, if this is a
Yeah.
work session, don't just spring it on you.
Exactly. I'm reacting. I'm not working. I'm
Right.
reacting.
Yep.
So, there was just for discussion today, and that to introduce it.
So is the public hearing already set? I guess that's my question. We already advertised that?
Well, I emailed it today for Saturday.
Okay.
Just so, I mean, we've been talking about it for a little while now, so I want to get something moving, so then we can maybe people could utilize it potentially.
I'm fine, Brandy. I'm fine having the public hearing in 2 weeks or whatever it's going to be. It's just in the future, we've been talking about it, but if I'd like to see the actual language in front of me before I open my mouth, and even in a discussion work session.
Yeah, and it'll be the draft, this illustration, and the ordinance amendment will be in your agenda packet. But I'll email it out after this meeting, and then you guys can
Because
start.
technically the ordinance, if you're publishing on Saturday, the ordinance has to be made available for public inspection the day that it gets published. So the ordinance needs to be completely written at the time that it's being published for public notice.
So we'd have to have it completely written and ready to go before Saturday.
Right, because you're putting the public on
Right.
notice, so
Yep.
it's just good protocol.
Yeah.
Can we just go back to the side yard setback here real quick? I'm a little concerned on the 6-foot side yard setback with access to rear yard, and then also from the outside storage perspective. I like your visual representation of the 9-foot on one side. I would probably be more comfortable if we had that language actually in the ordinance that required it on one side. Because I think if we don't, we're going to see predominantly 6-foot side yards on both sides, and then we lose all that accessibility.
And you get junk stored in the front yard.
But we could do a 6-foot side yard on one side and a 9-foot side yard setback on the other side. Leave one side with accessibility, and it really doesn't matter which one.
I kind of, my thought process was that it might self-regulate itself, that people would think about that.
But that doesn't happen in principle.
But I feel like it's a variance waiting to happen. I mean, that people are going to want 6 foot on both sides.
We say no the first time,
Right.
and it doesn't happen.
We'll just write it that way. I agree, and with our we've just started to enforce, you can't store things on your driveway. And so we don't want this. I mean, small houses, small lots, it could get cluttered really quickly. So I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think that on the attached category, it should be 9 feet setback, because there's only going to be
For the
one.
duplex scenario.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that you have that ability to get to the back.
Okay.
I think we can add that. I think that's important.
I don't really know how this looks. I'll work with that. But here I just added that 0 to 9. But then, I mean, 6 and 9 on each side.
Again, realistically, I think we as a community and our ordinance should be going. I know we live and die by the schedule. I think if you were just to draw it, and you could just show these.
We can do both.
You can do
Yeah.
both, but eventually, I think that's where we should be going, is
Yeah.
a visual
Mhm.
ordinance, as opposed to something that
Yeah.
the public does not understand when
Something
you read it.
of this effect will be included in the ordinance.
Hatchings.
Yeah.
I will get it pristine before we have it in the ordinance. But this was discussion, and this was just to depict, like, worst case scenario of impervious surface.
And if it's necessary, if we have the public hearing and there's a lot of input and discussion, you can postpone your action.
Sure.
And we can revise and bring it back. We don't necessarily need to redo a public hearing.
Yep.
Don't want you to feel like you have to act before you're ready. But on the other hand,
And then just one final comment, if you could go back to the schedule there. On the corner lots specifically, or the matrix. So on the corner lots specifically, I'm a little concerned with, so if you went to the minimum lot size there with a 50-foot width, and based upon the multiple front yard setbacks, that the buildable area on that corner lot is going to be very small compared to the interior lots. So that's one thing that I think we should look at before we finalize those numbers.
Okay.
It's going to be just like, and we can look at this here too. I've got some visuals to put up on the R2A, but it's going to be very similar to these because these are 50-foot lots as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll look into that and see what there is for buildable area and what that would allow for.
Because if we're doing it on a half block, we're going to have 2 corner lots.
right. Mm-hmm.
Do we want to regulate by, like how we do RG, we do it by acres? 1 acre?
No.
That's what I was saying. I'd rather see it block language than square footage or acreage, because then that's when you start getting checkerboards.
Okay.
And you'll end up with the minimum area, but it's not the whole length of a block.
That's just for rezone? Or is that for new development?
On new development, you could use a minimum square footage or minimum acreage if I want to come out and open up a new area. But if I'm
I
talking,
don't know if I'd want to, though.
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure
you
if
could.
I want to. You
could.
could though. But I'm thinking more of the half block stuff. It's definitely on
Right.
the redevelopment areas.
Yeah.
If it's, and it's particularly if it's a new area, you want it to go all the way from one street to the next, and then if you got a block. And
I'm just thinking, the layouts of new developments are asymmetrical. They're not like the block type layout that you typically would have seen in the older neighborhoods, right? So how do you define block when it's curving roads and?
If there's no road in between it, you're on the same block. So in some of these 1,500 and 2,000 foot long blocks,
Yeah.
so be it. I don't like those kind of blocks personally, but we do have a lot of new ones like that.
Yeah.
And so a block is a block. That's if you say it's only got to be X number of square feet, you're going to have checkerboard.
Right.
So I'd stick with the block. Anything else
Sounds
we're
good.
forgetting to address?
I think this is good.
Okay.
I appreciate all the hard work you guys have put into this. It's a big deal developing a new zone, and it's definitely something the community needs. So,
Thank you. I agree.
Good work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you go into your R2A discussion, could we bring up, I have another appointment, so I was wondering if we
Yeah.
could bring up the old business under the temporary zoning.
yeah, that's fine.
If you recall, the last time we had met, we had talked about the temporary zoning rules, temporary sign rules, and we've been having more and more meetings, and we had made a motion to continue the public hearing and discussion that we've had for the last couple months to this date. I can tell you, it's my understanding that those temporary sign code regulations are near completion, and I would like to make a motion to continue this again to the
June 24th.
June 24th meeting. And we should be getting copies of those to us all at least in the next week or so. That's my understanding.
Okay.
And
Second.
thank you.
Motion by Mr. Kay, second by Mr. Colhane. All in favor?
And
Opposed? Motion passes.
Then the other quick bit of information that I can relay on to you is that It's my understanding that the comprehensive land use plan that's been worked on for the last several years is at a completion point, and that it's a rather large document, and we're looking at how to disseminate that information. It's several hundred pages, and trying to find a way to Dropbox it, web host it, so people can have access. So you should be getting a note here and sometime in the next few days about a location where you can get it, as opposed to having to kill 12 trees to.
That's excellent. I've been waiting for it because it's been a couple years in the making.
Yeah, it's been a process. But I think my understanding, Mr. Muller has said to me that staff and him have looked at it, and it's now ready for this point. We're looking at hopefully some sort of a joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission in July, and then a public hearing process to start after that.
Sounds good.
I'm sorry, I do have to excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
So with that, we can jump into the R2A discussion. I got some visuals here. I don't know if you had anything, Kenny, but we can throw these up. I think these will help to kind of visualize. You get the projector thing?
Yeah, Kate will. So if you just put it.
And then I'll have you kind of flip through them. I got a few different examples there. See how well they show up on the screen. I should have probably sent a digital file instead. Then.
Yeah, where was the heads up?
I just threw this together this afternoon, so. So at the top of the page, I've got a description of what the lot size here is. I think the first page is a 50 by 165 foot lot. So this is the exact size of the two parcels that we looked at earlier with the Board of Adjustment meeting. They were both 50 by 165. The visual representation there is of the lot, and it represents the side yard setbacks, the front yard setbacks, and the rear yard setbacks. So A there is side yard setback. B and E are actually front yard setbacks because this is a corner lot. D would be the rear yard setback, so adjacent to the alleyway. The C section, the green section, is the only buildable area on that particular lot. So if you look at that, once you take away all the setbacks, you've limited that buildable area down to a 19 by 120 foot area. It's 28% of the lot is technically buildable. So it's a pretty small percentage of the lot that we're saying that they can actually build a structure on. Down below that is an interior lot of the same dimensions. So because they don't have the double front yard, they've got two side yard setbacks. They've actually got 55% of their lots actually buildable. There's a pretty substantial difference between the two.
Okay, so R2A is no new development, and that, okay. So are you maybe thinking that we would add a corner lot stipulation in there for R2A?
Correct.
Okay.
So I just wanted to illustrate this because we do predominantly see these variance requests over the years on these R2A corner lots. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is because of the double front yard setback. And when you actually look at this visually, it's pretty telling that the vast majority of the lot is unbuildable based upon the existing setbacks. So page 2 there, I've got just another example of an R2A. Both of these are fairly common in the R2A district. This is a 48 by 150 foot lot, so it's slightly smaller, 7,200 total square foot. You see the buildable area there on the corner lot went down to 25%. As these lots get smaller, that percentage continues to get smaller as well because the front yard setbacks are static. The next example is going to be an R1. So that's just an interior lot of the same dimensions. So if you flip to the next page, we've got an R1 lot. So here's the R1 district. This is minimum lot size. So the minimum lot size for a corner lot in R1 is 85 feet. And then if you take the minimum square footage requirement for a corner lot of 10,000, you get an 85 by 120 foot lot. Leaves 35% buildable right in the center. If you go down, I've got the interior lots for R1. So 9-foot setbacks. It's only 9,000 square foot minimum requirement, so that's a 75 by 120, and that leaves 39% buildable. So they're fairly close in R1, 35% buildable to 39% buildable versus the 50 to 25 in the R2A. Right. And so what I was looking at, and this is what Ken was talking about earlier, is if we did a 20-foot setback on R2A for the front yard setback specific to corner lots. That would afford them a little bit of flexibility on the front yard setbacks on both sides, and it would bring that buildable area up to 36%, which is more in line with what we have in the R1 district. That was just an idea, but I think I think we have to do something, because I think it's unreasonable to only allow 25% of a lot to be buildable.
Yeah, I got about 8 pending people with this garage situation like we just did tonight. I said, wait. We're looking at this, and maybe we'll come up with a solution that won't take you to the board. So, and I think the 20-foot, the 24-foot width is a very reasonable. At least they can do something, put 2 cars in there if they need to and such. I
think so too, and I think a 20-foot front yard setback on these lots is still substantial, especially when the boulevard in some of these lots is actually pretty large as well.
Yeah, as many times they're 80-footers.
yeah, exactly. So most of these people actually think that their front yard is much bigger than it realistically is when you look at the property line. So I don't think that there's going to be an issue with green space if we were to do this 5-yard difference. No. But it would allow the homeowners a lot more flexibility on where they could put their structures.
And if for some reason there wasn't an alley there, the 20-foot is still like what we required off the alley, and that's what we observed. That 18.5 feet is what we want for a parking space, so 20-foot is enough to park off the sidewalk or off the alley.
They got to get pretty close.
And still there, but so the 5-foot's not encroaching that to the point. I mean, I'm not saying not every vehicle can fit in there, but most of them will.
Yep. But a full-size pickup is just under 19 feet.
Well, Blake, first, thank you very much. This is incredible, and it's very helpful. In this particular example that we're looking at, B would be alley side?
B would actually be their primary front yard.
D would be alley side.
So you could do this a couple different ways. You could stipulate that the lower setback is only applicable to the secondary front yard, or you could apply it to both. I'm not sure that it makes a huge difference, but certainly we could talk about it.
But so in this example that we're looking at right now, B, E, and D have all been reduced setbacks.
Now D would stay the same. So that's the alley setback, and that's already 20 feet.
Oh, okay, understood. That makes sense.
And the reason originally I started looking at this with just the secondary setback, so E. Being a reduced setback, but from a standpoint of policing this and how to write it into ordinance, I thought it just maybe is easier if we make them both reduced, and then we can do just like we do on the side yard setback. So if you go down, there's some language there where it says where corner parcels are 75 feet. Oh, too far. Where corner parcels are 75 feet or more in width, the required front yard, blah blah blah, and do it as a percentage.
Yeah.
So it's a minimum, not less than 20 feet, but if they've got a larger lot, it'll still default back to the 25-foot.
So, Pete, if you could switch me over, then I kind of drafted it here, where this would just be no new development and corner lots.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If Pete could put my screen up. I live in the R2A, and I like where you're headed, but make sure that you go far enough. And I'll point this out. This is the house that I just have sold. And you can see that I clearly have the adequate front setback. But there's no way that you're going to get a small, any size of a house in there with a 20-foot setback on the side yard either. And Mr. Meyer, who's in the audience, lives here. And because we have that such wide boulevard, we're hemmed in. I mean, and you look at any one of these houses, the side yards will not accommodate even your 20-foot. So make sure that as you evaluate what you're doing, look at that. And this is very common throughout that whole neighborhood.
Yeah, and
And-
in fact, I looked at some of these exact
Right,
lots, and you get
right. So
pretty small lots.
I like where you're headed. Just make sure that you go far enough.
Yep.
Because
The only other thing, though, is most of our R2A is already developed, and a lot of those houses are already there, non-conforming.
Yep.
The biggest part of the building that we need to do is somebody trying to put in
The
accessory structures. So before you go too far, there's part of it that you might still want to leave as a variance or appeals request.
correct. Or
Yep.
or if you put a thing in there, like I'll just use Mark's house as the example because he's the closest hemmed in. If his house burned down, allow him to build it back where it is, without having to be
Yeah,
restricted.
and for that matter, I guess, personally, I wouldn't be opposed to having language within our ordinance that these R2A non-conforming lots could rebuild should their house burn down.
original footprint.
In the original footprint.
So that's my recommendation because all of these houses would be in trouble.
You're right. A significant portion of R2A in general would be. Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, and this is where R2A could start turning over to R1A.
Or that.
Because it's
But,
this,
But
this
anyway,
thing. But
food for thought.
we have an area
In, yeah. There's a lot that wouldn't be in compliance with the R1A as proposed as well, just based on the existing structures that are there. This is just a basis of conversation, though. At this point, I wanted to bring it to the staff for an example, and then I guess I would just ask that staff maybe take a look at this and develop it a little further, and then we can bring something back and see if we can make some changes.
and we can bring it at the same time as we bring R1A. But what do you guys think of that? Pete will pull me up there. So the front yard, just changing that to 20.
Do you want to do a flat 20, or should we do the language based on the size? So I had that drafted language there, which was very similar to the way that we do the side yard, so that if they do have a larger width R2A lot.
Okay. Yeah, so then I would just put that, the footnote.
Because I think if the lot is of substantial size, we don't need to reduce that setback. It's just these really small ones that wouldn't meet the requirements today,
So so I think I'll make sure that your language is consistent with what D is reading, but I think that's where that would
Yeah,
take care of that.
add another footnote.
Because to say that if it is,
Because if they got an 80-foot wide lot, we don't need to reduce
Right.
the front yard setback.
okay. Sounds good. Yeah, so I'll just redo this one and say front
I think
yard.
you'd have two. You'd have one still
Yeah.
for the side yard and then one for the front yard on the corner lots.
Yep. Yep. So it'll be something to this effect, but
Does that sound good to everybody else? Is there any additional comments from the board?
No, I really appreciate the work, though. Nice job.
It's one of those things where we've seen a lot of these come before us over the years. At least in my time, I've seen a lot of them. And this seems like a reasonable compromise where we could be a little bit more flexible. But once we do make this change, I think it's something where we need to stick to our guns now. And this is the new rule of the land. And we've developed a policy that's more reasonable in their ability to use the property that they own.
I did have one question, Blake. Will this impact sort of the outline of structures in relation to others? I mean, is there any issue with that, do you think? Or maybe
I thought about that. So this is no new development here, right? So they could potentially add on a porch or something, but if you got a porch abutting out. It's actually fairly common within R2A as it exists today, because just like the one that we looked at before, it was 9.6 feet off the front property line, and the one next door to it was 20 feet. So that's just kind of the nature of the area. If you live in R2A, they're anything and everything. So. Good.
Anybody have anything else?
I had nothing else.
So then I'll include those changes to Blake, and then I'll email that out tomorrow to you guys.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any need for executive session?
Nope.
Take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Stein, second by Colhane. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.